Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling something huge, the UN Security Council. Specifically, India's really long push for a permanent seat, and crucially, that veto power.
Yeah, it's been decades in the making, this effort. But what's interesting now, what our research suggests, is that something's finally given way, like a logjam breaking.
Right, and that's the hook, isn't it? The sources we've looked at are basically saying India is incredibly close, maybe even on the verge of getting that veto, becoming the sixth permanent member.
Exactly. So our mission today is, well, first, understand what this veto thing is. Then why India wants it so badly. And finally, unpack this specific diplomatic move, the BRICS connection, that seems to have forced a major shift, especially from China.
And the U.S. too, apparently. The claim is even they feel sort of compelled to support India now, which is quite a turnaround.
The compelled part is key. It points to a real structural pressure. So let's start with the prize itself. What exactly is this veto power, and where does it live inside the UN?
Okay, so the veto lives in the Security Council, the UNSC. That's the UN's most powerful body, right? The one that deals with war and peace.
Absolutely. Its decisions are legally binding on all UN member states. It's supposed to maintain international peace and security. That's its job.
And it's got, what, 15 members? But not all are equal.
No, not at all. You've got 10 non-permanent members. They get elected for 2-year terms. They vote. They participate. But the real permanent power lies with the P5. The permanent five.
The P5. That's America, Russia, China, Britain, and France. The winners of World War II, essentially. Still running the show based on that 1945 setup.
Precisely. And only those 5 countries hold the veto power.
Okay, so explain the veto itself. How does it actually work?
It's starkly simple, really. For any major substantive resolution to pass the Security Council, you need 9 yes votes, including the concurring votes of all 5 permanent members.
Meaning, even if 14 countries, including 4 P5 members, vote yes on something crucial.
If just one P5 member votes no cast, a veto, the resolution fails. Completely blocked. Doesn't matter what the other 14 think.
Wow. Okay, so that single vote can override almost global consensus.
It absolutely can, and it often does. That's why the sources frame it this way. Having the veto makes you a real player on the world stage, someone with final say. Without it, you're more of a powerful spectator, maybe? But still a spectator.
Got it. So that explains what India is chasing. Now, why the obsession? The sources use this phrase, pagalaya hua, meaning like relentlessly driven, almost fixated on getting this veto for years.
Yeah.
What's behind that intensity?
Well, the analysis breaks it down into about 4 main reasons. They all circle back to security and equality, really.
Okay, what's the first one?
First is just sheer global stature. Think about it. India is the world's biggest democracy, right? Now the most populous country on Earth, 4th largest economy. Yet on the top table of global security, it doesn't have power equal to the U.S. or China or Russia.
So there's a mismatch between its actual weight in the world and its formal power in the UN system.
Exactly. It feels like an outdated restriction. Second reason is very practical. Security and countering challenges.
Ah, this sounds like the China angle.
It often is, yeah. The sources point out that China frequently uses its position, sometimes subtly, sometimes not, within international bodies, including the UNSC, to, block things India sees as vital to its interests, or to shield actors hostile to India, like backing Pakistan consistently.
Right. So a veto would give India a way to just shut that down. Instantly.
Precisely. It's a defensive tool. It lets India neutralize those kinds of moves single-handedly on the global stage, protect its own security interests without needing anyone else's permission.
Okay, that makes sense. What's number 3?
Third is about global decision-making. Look, India leads or co-leads major groups, BRICS, obviously, the G20 presidency recently. It champions the global south. It sets agendas for billions of people. But when push comes to shove, when the final binding decisions on war, peace, sanctions, international action are made, those happen in the UNSC. And India doesn't currently have that final say. They want in on those ultimate decisions.
They want to be in the room where it happens, with the power to say yes or no.
You got it. And the fourth reason loops back to the history. Call it historical injustice.
Because when the UN was set up in 1945,
India was still a British colony. It wasn't independent, so it wasn't considered for one of the permanent seats given to the major powers of that era. India today argues that setup is archaic. It doesn't reflect the world of the 21st century, and it's actively preventing a major emerging power from taking its well, what it sees as its rightful place.
Okay, so a deep sense of needing equal status, practical security needs, wanting decision-making power, and correcting that historical exclusion. That's powerful mix driving this.
Absolutely. It explains the decades of persistence.
But persistence alone didn't work for decades. Now something seems to have cracked. Let's talk about this geopolitical shockwave. What's happening right now?
Well, the immediate context is recent UN meetings, particularly in New York. The demand for India's permanent membership with veto power was pushed very hard again, and the atmosphere seems different.
How so?
The level of open support is huge. The figure cited is 146 countries now openly backing India's bid in some form.
Wait a minute. If 146 countries are on board, why does China's past opposition or U.S. reluctance even matter so much? Isn't that an overwhelming majority?
You'd think so, but that's the brutal reality of the UN Charter. Reforming the Security Council, especially changing the permanent membership or veto rules, requires amending the Charter itself.
And that, of course.
The consent of all 5 current permanent members. Any one of them can block any reform, regardless of how many other countries support it. So 146 votes are great, but politically you need the P5.
Ah, okay, so China was the main roadblock for India historically.
Absolutely. For years, China consistently used the threat of its veto, or procedural blocks, to prevent any serious movement on expanding the permanent category, especially for India. They talked about reform in general terms, but stalled anything concrete.
But now, the sources say China has done a complete 180, not just stopped blocking, but offered full support. That's the big surprise.
That's the bombshell, yes. A complete reversal, according to these analyses. And then there's the second surprise, the U.S.
Right, the compelled support. That sounds like they were dragged into it. Is there actual evidence for that, or is it just interpreting diplomatic language? What forced their hand if they were reluctant?
Well, the sources argue the compulsion comes directly from the mechanism India used. It wasn't about suddenly convincing the U.S. on the merits alone. It was about the strategic situation India engineered primarily through BRICS.
Okay, so this brings us to segment 4. The diplomatic mechanism, the BRICS strategy. How did India use BRICS to flip China and apparently corner the U.S.?
It seems India orchestrated a very significant BRICS summit meeting. The key takeaway wasn't just the usual pronouncements. India used it to demonstrate that BRICS, as a collective, now carries enough economic and geopolitical weight to genuinely challenge or bypass Western-led initiatives if it chooses to coordinate.
So less about asking nicely, more about showing collective strength,
Huh.
pressure through potential alternatives.
Exactly. It wasn't lobbying Washington or Paris directly. It was about consolidating a powerful bloc, Russia, China, South Africa, Brazil, and the new members, and getting that bloc to speak with one voice on UNSC reform.
And the outcome was this joint statement.
Yes. A critical joint statement came out of their meetings. It referenced earlier agreements like the 2023 Johannesburg Declaration, but it went further. It strongly asserted that UN reform is urgent, necessary, and needs to make the Council more democratic, representative, and effective. Standard language, mostly.
But there was something specific in there for India.
Yes. Buried among maybe 20-plus points was point 14. And according to the analysis, this was historic. Point 14 explicitly stated with Russia, and crucially China signing on, that they support the aspiration of countries like India and Brazil to play a greater role in the UN, including in the Security Council. And it specifically called for their permanent membership.
Whoa, okay. So China put its name